Have you ever noticed that people often take your presence for granted until you're gone? Have you ever given your time, energy, loyalty, and attention to someone, only to realize they never truly appreciated it? And then, the moment you stop chasing, stop explaining, and quietly walk away, everything changes. Suddenly, they begin to notice the silence you left behind. They begin to feel the absence of what they once had. Today, we will explore one of the most powerful Stoic lessons about self-respect, discipline, and the strength of walking away when staying only diminishes your value. There comes a point in life when continuing to hold on hurts more than letting go. Many people stay in situations where they are not valued because they hope things will improve. They keep giving second chances, third chances, and endless opportunities. But Stoicism teaches us that wisdom is knowing when persistence becomes self-destruction. Walking away is not giving up. Walking away is recognizing that your peace, dignity, and self-respect are worth protecting. The moment you stop forcing yourself to remain where you are not appreciated, you begin reclaiming your power. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that their constant availability increases their value. They think that by always being present, always answering, always helping, and always putting others first, they will earn appreciation and respect. Yet human nature often works differently. What is constantly available can slowly become invisible. When people know they can reach you whenever they want, they stop noticing the sacrifices behind your presence. Your kindness becomes expected. Your support becomes routine. Your patience becomes something they assume will always be there. Without realizing it, they begin to treat your efforts not as a gift, but as an obligation. This is not because your value disappeared, it is because familiarity often blinds people to the worth of what they have. The more you give without limits, the easier it becomes for others to forget how much you are actually giving. The Stoics understood this truth deeply. They knew that true value does not come from chasing attention or constantly proving your importance. Instead, value becomes visible when it is no longer freely available. When you step back from places where your presence was taken for granted, something remarkable happens. The silence where your support once existed becomes noticeable. The guidance you provided, the loyalty you offered, and the stability you brought can no longer be ignored. Your absence creates a contrast that reveals what your presence had been contributing all along. This is why wise people do not beg to be appreciated. They do not exhaust themselves trying to convince others of their worth. They simply protect their energy, maintain their dignity, and allow reality to teach the lesson. When people finally experience life without the person they once overlooked, they often realize that what they considered ordinary was actually extraordinary. Not because you demanded recognition, but because your absence exposed a value they failed to see while you were standing right beside them. Walking away requires tremendous discipline because every part of you may be pulling in the opposite direction. Your emotions will whisper that maybe one more conversation will change everything. Your heart will remind you of the good memories, the promises, and the hope that things could become different. Fear will tell you that leaving means failure, loss, or loneliness. But the Stoics taught that wisdom is found not in following every emotion, but in understanding them without becoming controlled by them. Emotions are powerful messengers, but they are poor masters. A disciplined person listens to their feelings, learns from them, and then makes decisions based on reason rather than temporary emotional storms. True strength is not having a heart of stone. True strength is having a heart that feels deeply while still choosing what is right. This is why walking away is often one of the hardest and most courageous acts a person can perform. It means choosing self-respect when your emotions are begging for attachment. It means accepting uncomfortable truths instead of clinging to comforting illusions. Every step away from disrespect, manipulation, neglect, or one-sided relationships is not a step backward, it is a step toward freedom. The pain of leaving may feel heavy in the moment, but the cost of staying where you are not valued is often far greater. The disciplined person understands that temporary discomfort is sometimes the price of lasting peace. They are willing to endure a difficult goodbye rather than spend years trapped in situations that slowly drain their confidence, dignity, and happiness. In the end, discipline is choosing the future version of yourself over the temporary comfort of remaining where you no longer belong. The strongest people are not those who can hold on forever, they are those who know exactly when it is time to let go and walk forward with their heads held high. Many people misunderstand the purpose of walking away. They imagine it as a strategy to make someone suffer, miss them, or regret their choices. They secretly hope that their absence will become a lesson that forces others to recognize their value. But when your main goal is to create regret in someone else, you remain emotionally tied to the very situation you are trying to escape. Your peace still depends on their reaction. Your happiness still depends on whether they notice your absence. Your self-worth is still being measured by their response. Stoic philosophy teaches a far more powerful approach. Walking away is not about changing another person's mind, it is about reclaiming control over your own life. The moment your focus shifts from their reaction to your own growth, you become truly free. True strength is leaving without carrying the burden of revenge, resentment, or the need to prove a point. It is understanding that your value exists whether someone recognizes it or not. The strongest people do not spend their days waiting for apologies that may never come or validation that may never arrive. They accept reality as it is and move forward with dignity. If someone eventually realizes what they lost, that realization belongs to them, not to you. It is their lesson, their regret, and their responsibility. Your responsibility is to protect your peace, honor your standards, and continue building a life that reflects your worth. There is incredible power in choosing yourself without anger, without bitterness, and without needing an audience to applaud your decision. The person who walks away for self-respect gains something far greater than revenge, they gain freedom. And freedom is worth far more than any apology, explanation, or delayed recognition from those who failed to appreciate them in the first place. One of the most surprising truths in life is that people often recognize your value only after they no longer have access to it. While you were present, your efforts may have seemed ordinary to them. They noticed your mistakes more than your sacrifices. They focused on your imperfections while overlooking the countless ways you showed up for them. Your loyalty became expected. Your kindness became routine. Your support became something they assumed would always be available. This is a common part of human nature. People often become so familiar with what they have that they stop seeing its true worth. It is only when that presence is gone that they begin to understand the role it played in their lives. The absence creates a clarity that constant availability never could. What makes this truth so powerful is that you do not have to force it. You do not need to argue, defend yourself, or convince anyone of your importance. Reality has a way of teaching lessons that words cannot. When your support is no longer there to solve problems, when your encouragement is no longer there to lift someone up, and when your presence is no longer there to provide comfort, people are often left facing a reality they never fully appreciated before. The Stoics understood that truth does not need endless explanations to survive. Truth reveals itself through time, experience, and consequences. This is why wise people stop exhausting themselves trying to make others understand. They focus instead on living with integrity and self-respect, trusting that reality will eventually speak on their behalf. There is a unique strength in silence when it is supported by wisdom. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is the highest form of confidence because it refuses to chase validation. While words can be ignored, debated, or misunderstood, reality is much harder to argue with. The person who constantly explains their worth often remains trapped in a cycle of seeking approval. The person who quietly walks away allows life itself to reveal what their presence meant. And when that realization finally arrives, it is often far more powerful than anything they could have said. Sometimes your silence carries a message that years of explanations never could. It tells the world that you know your value, that you no longer need to prove it, and that your peace is worth more than endless attempts to be understood. Self-mastery begins the moment you stop chasing those who are comfortable losing you. It is the point where you shift from external validation to internal stability. Many people spend years exhausting themselves trying to convince others of their worth. They explain their intentions repeatedly, hoping to be understood. They bend their boundaries to be accepted. They overextend their patience to be appreciated. Slowly, they begin to measure their value through the eyes of those who may never truly recognize it. This creates a cycle where self-respect is traded for approval, and peace is sacrificed for attention. Stoicism offers a different path, one rooted in clarity rather than dependency. It teaches that your worth is not something granted by others, it is something you live by through your actions, principles, and character. You are not defined by who chooses to see your value, just as light is not diminished by closed eyes. The sun does not lose its brilliance because someone refuses to look at it. In the same way, your value remains unchanged whether it is acknowledged or ignored. What changes is perception, not reality. When you internalize this truth, something powerful shifts within you. You stop negotiating your worth in places where it is not respected. You stop chasing relationships that require you to shrink yourself to be accepted. Instead, you begin to stand in your own identity without apology. Self-mastery is not about becoming distant or indifferent, it is about becoming anchored. It is the ability to remain steady even when others misunderstand you, overlook you, or take you for granted. In that steadiness, you reclaim your energy, your focus, and your peace. And in doing so, you no longer chase those who are comfortable losing you, you simply continue walking forward with quiet certainty in your own value. Walking away also creates space for growth, and this is one of its most overlooked benefits. As long as you remain emotionally attached to what drains your energy, you cannot fully invest in what strengthens you. Attention is limited, time is limited, and mental energy is limited. When those resources are constantly consumed by worry, overthinking, chasing approval, or trying to fix what is not meant to be fixed, there is very little left for your own development. You end up standing still while convincing yourself that you are making progress, simply because you are busy. But the moment you step away from what is not aligned with your well-being, something changes. The energy that was once tied up in emotional chaos becomes available again. Instead of repeatedly proving your worth, you can start building it. Instead of replaying conversations in your mind, you can focus on learning new skills, improving your discipline, and strengthening your habits. You begin to redirect your attention from external validation to internal construction. This shift is where real transformation begins. Every ending carries within it the possibility of a beginning. What feels like loss at first often becomes space for something better to emerge. When you stop pouring energy into dead ends, you are not losing something valuable, you are freeing yourself from something that was limiting your growth. That space can now be filled with progress, clarity, and purpose. You can invest in your health, your mindset, your goals, and your future without constant emotional interruption. In this way, walking away is not just an act of separation, it is an act of creation. It creates the conditions where a stronger, more focused, and more disciplined version of you finally has room to grow. Another Stoic lesson is understanding that not everyone is meant to accompany you throughout your entire journey. Life is not a single continuous bond with the same people, but a series of chapters where different individuals play different roles. Some arrive to teach you patience when you are impulsive. Some arrive to teach you strength when you are weak. Some arrive to teach you self-respect when you are willing to settle for less. Their presence is meaningful, but it is not always permanent. The difficulty comes when we confuse connection with permanence. We assume that because someone once mattered deeply, they must always remain part of our future. But growth often requires movement, and movement sometimes requires separation. Holding on to people who no longer align with who you are becoming does not preserve the past, it only slows down the future. You find yourself revisiting old patterns, old emotions, and old versions of yourself that you were meant to outgrow. Stoicism teaches acceptance of natural transitions. Not everything that ends is a failure, and not every departure is a loss. Some endings are simply part of a larger design of growth. When you release what no longer fits your path, you are not abandoning your story, you are allowing it to evolve. Wisdom is recognizing that change is not something to fear, but something to understand. In that understanding, you begin to see that every ending carries purpose. It clears space, refines direction, and moves you closer to the life you are meant to build. The most powerful transformation happens when you realize that peace is more valuable than attention. For many people, attention feels like validation, and validation feels like safety. That is why they stay in situations that quietly drain them. They fear loneliness more than they fear emotional exhaustion. They tolerate inconsistency, disrespect, or confusion simply to avoid the silence that comes with letting go. But Stoic wisdom offers a different perspective. Not all company is beneficial, and not all silence is harmful. In fact, some forms of solitude are far more nourishing than relationships that constantly disturb your inner balance. Stoics understood that peace is not found in external approval but in internal alignment. When your mind is constantly reacting to others, adjusting to their moods, or seeking their recognition, you lose stability. You begin to live outwardly instead of inwardly. But peace changes that direction. It brings you back to yourself. It gives you space to think clearly without emotional noise. It allows you to see situations for what they truly are, not for what you hope they might become. In that clarity, you begin to recognize patterns that once kept you stuck. Peace is not passive, it is powerful. It strengthens your ability to respond instead of react. It protects your energy from unnecessary conflict and emotional depletion. It allows you to grow without constant interruption from drama, confusion, or uncertainty. And as this inner peace deepens, something important shifts. External approval loses its control over you. You no longer feel the need to be understood by everyone. You no longer depend on attention to feel worthy. Instead, you become grounded in something far more stable, your own awareness of what is right for you. And once that happens, you become far less vulnerable to manipulation, disappointment, or emotional dependency, because your peace is no longer negotiable. In the end, walking away is not about loss. It is about liberation. It is about choosing self-respect over desperation, wisdom over attachment, and growth over stagnation. What feels like an ending is often the beginning of clarity. When you step away from situations that drain your energy or diminish your self-worth, you are not losing something meant for you, you are releasing what was limiting your potential. The mind often interprets separation as failure, but in reality, it is often a form of correction, a return to balance. The people who truly value you will naturally respect your boundaries. They will not require you to shrink yourself, over-explain your needs, or sacrifice your peace to maintain their presence in your life. And those who only valued your availability will eventually notice your absence, not because you intended to create a reaction, but because reality has a way of revealing what was overlooked. Yet, Stoic wisdom reminds us that your life is not defined by their realization. Your worth is not measured by who recognizes it late. Your journey shifts the moment you stop centering it around others' responses. It becomes about your own becoming, your discipline, your clarity, your peace, and your growth. The strongest version of yourself does not emerge from staying where you are drained, but from having the courage to step away from it. Walking away is not an act of bitterness, it is an act of alignment. It is the decision to no longer negotiate your well-being for temporary connection. And in that decision, you don't just leave something behind, you step into something greater, a life guided by self-respect and purpose. Now I want to ask you something important. Have you ever walked away from someone or something that was draining your peace, and later realized it was one of the best decisions of your life? Sometimes, in the moment, walking away feels like loss. It feels uncomfortable, uncertain, even painful. But with time, clarity begins to replace confusion, and you start to see that what you left behind was not meant to carry you forward, it was meant to teach you when to let go. Sometimes the greatest victory is not winning someone's approval or changing their perception of you. The greatest victory is reclaiming the respect you owe yourself. It is choosing your peace over validation, your growth over attachment, and your self-worth over emotional dependence. That is where real strength begins, not in holding on, but in knowing when to release. If you found value in this message, take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more content like this, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to find the courage to move forward on their own journey.